today we are going to have a look on a short and quick review of the presentation of interlanguage. So without wasting time, let's just move on. Our first language is a language that the child acquires at the early stage of the development. However, the target language is a language that the learner wants to acquire in order to achieve the proficiency in certain kind of language. It can be any language, either French, either Japanese, either Chinese or Turkish. In between these languages, inter means in between, there exists the interlanguage. Interlanguage is basically the pathway or the passage that leads to the target language. While learning a target language, a person commits a lot of mistakes. But the question arises, can these mistakes be properly cured? Can learner achieve the complete proficiency in the target language? So stay tuned for this question. So what's actually interlanguage is? The term of interlanguage was first published in 1972 under the authorship of a famous Alsace scholar and who was named as Larry Stinker. Basically, interlanguage is the status between the native language and the target language. While learning a language, a person commits a lot of errors, and by these kind of trials he achieved the system of language that is approximately close to the native language. But can we say that he achieves the status of the language that is the target language? The answer will be given later. Okay, basically the interlanguage and the production of second language can be acquired or can be assumed through three processes. Borrowing from the first of all occurs the borrowing from the mother tongue, which means that we borrow the certain words from the mother tongue and incorporate it into our language. For example, the desi word such as the word of nasi does not exist in the English language, but as a Urdu speaker, as they don't have the concept of that way in language, we borrow some terms from our mother tongue. Moreover, there are some extended patterns from the target language that are also borrowed. However, we express the words in grammar. When we are learning a certain kind of language, we express the kind of words or kind of structure of grammar that is already present in our first language while we are learning the target language or while we are in the process of the interlanguage. So here is the account, or here is the example, or here is the sample of the writing of a student who is learning a target language. He is continuously making the mistake of the spelling, like the mistake of the account, and moreover he is making the mistake of an article, which is an. So let us move on towards the features of interlanguage. Interlanguage can basically have three features. It can have the properties of the language one, which means that our interlanguage can be influenced by our first language and our target, and the process of learning the target language has an impact of the first language. The properties and rules of the both L1 and N2, and there can be certain features that are present in the interlanguage that are either not the feature of the L1 nor the feature of the N2, neither the feature of the N2. So let's just have a look on the influence of first language in the target language. Certain kinds of errors are basically produced with the influence of first language. As we know that a person idealizes his or her language, his or culture, his or her surrounding. He idealizes the situation, he idealizes the pronunciation of the language where he lives. Moreover, the society sometimes also forces the person or the child to not to speak in a certain manner. This can also be the hindrance, or this can also create the influence of the first language on the target language. However, I think so that it is a part of situation. It is totally fine to use the Pakistani and our desi accent while you are speaking English, and in my opinion, as is also proved through the research of the West, which we will discuss later, that a person who is learning a target language, whether it is French, Japanese or any kind of language, cannot achieve the proficiency of the target language that he is learning. For example, in English we say the correct pronunciation is chocolate, but in Urdu we say chocolate. The correct pronunciation is pizza, but we say pizza in our desi accent, and it is totally fine. And there is water, and we will say water. We basically say the things like this because in the Urdu language there are a lot of vowels as compared to the English language. So there is the influence or impact of the our first language on the second language, and I am taking these languages as a source of example. It can be Chinese or French. You can suppose the language answer is Chinese or French. Okay, there are not only differences due to phonological structures or the pronunciation, but also due to the sentence structure. For example, English language has the combination of subject, verb and object, and Urdu has the combination of subject, object and verb, which means fail, mafhoon and fa'il. So if I would say that Aisha brought a book, okay, the sentence here is that here contains a subject, verb and object. However, if I would say it if I would use the same Urdu structure, same the structure of the Urdu language in the sentence, I would say Aisha a book brought, which will be inappropriate as verb is at the end in the Urdu language. So, what are developmental and transfer errors? Basically, developmental errors occur when a person build up hypothesis about the target language on the basis of limited experience. The person is acquiring the target language and he has a limited experience of that very language. These kind of errors are produced due to the learning ability and can be somehow cured. They are more in children, however lesser in adults. But the errors that transferred from first language to a second language, like the pronunciations that we have discussed before, like the sentence structure we have discussed before, a child can acquire the accent more easily. A child can acquire multiple languages at a time as compared to an adult in the critical phase of his life, which is from the time period of his birth to his early stages of his life, or in the puberty. And the adult produces the errors of about 10 to 20%. Which means that adults have much influence over their first language while learning the second language. So it is proved that if a child learns the language while he is young, he can be more proficient in multiple kind of languages, and such childs have more the cognitive and developmental skills in them. Okay, so as we have discussed, we are discussing the third feature here, that there exists certain type of errors, there exists certain type of problems that are either not the part of the N1 or not they came from the N2. For example, if I would say, is Noor love chocolate cake? This kind of structure is not present in Urdu language, but we are using this structure. Similarly, if I would say goed instead of went, I would use the irregular verbs. This is also a case that is not these kind of errors are not due to the influence of first language, or they are not, or this kind of structure is not present in the second language, but the learner is making mistakes while doing so. So the question here arises that can interlanguage achieve the status of a target language, which can be discussed through the case of Wes, who was a student who was studying English at junior high school in his country, and at the age of 33 he migrated to the Hawaii, and after becoming adult he migrated. Then he was an extrovert person, he connected the people socially, again he was using language 75 to 90% of the times, but he was not able to learn that way language properly, as he was making certain kinds of mistake. And here is a sample of his speech writing. There are certain mistakes that are pointed out, he was making these kinds of mistakes. So you can pause and read that mistakes. So it is proved that interlanguage cannot achieve the status of a target language when it comes to accent. However, grammatical structures and these kind of things can be improved, but to a certain level, because when a person learns, and though he was a person who was learning English at his junior school, but as a child he was not exposed to that very native society. This is why he is not able to produce that very language as much as sufficient. Even a PhD scholar cannot produce an English language exactly of the British or American accent, you would say. Each person who speaks English has its own flavor, has a own touch of his or her country, his or her society. Like you can feel it in my speech. Moreover, when we are learning English, when we are learning the interlanguage, there comes a plateau, there comes a gap, there comes a point when there is no change in our language. For example, I am learning the first language, I am learning the first language ke baad I am learning the interlanguage, and I am gradually developing. Then there comes a process, there comes certain fossilization when there is no change in the language. However, these type of fossilization can also be cured, but there are certain other points and things that need to be explained. But the topic of the presentation was limited, so we are concluding the presentation as the interlanguage status between the first language and the target language, and fossilization basically refers to the development of N2 learners. Okay? And then this plateau, the development of plateau, or the slope in the growth in the language of N2 learners, it can be permanent, it can become permanent. Okay? And learners continue making these kinds of mistakes, like when I am speaking English, I am also making a not count of pronunciation mistakes. Pronunciation mistakes are less common as compared to the mistakes of the accent, because we can acquire the pronunciation but can't the accent. I don't think so we need to follow the accent. If you have any question, you can ask. That's all from my side. Thank you, and Hafiz.